believe what?
You're one of the undead, and I'm a werewolf.
Tomorrow night's the full moon. You're gonna change.
A what?
You'll become... I know. A monster.
A naked American man stole my balloon.
What?
What did I do last night?
You don't remember?
The last remaining werewolf must be destroyed. It's you, David.
Run!
Good Lord.
And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not-So-Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Sunday evening here with me in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Sticking with the same theme of Halloween horror, this will be the 5th entry in our continuing series, which will continue at least through the end of this month, Halloween proper. And movies that we've discussed so far, for those who've missed one or two, or even if this is the first time you're checking it out, we have talked about The Exorcist. We have talked about The Blair Witch Project. We have talked about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre OG 1974. And we've talked about The Wicker Man, also OG, in that instance, 1973. Well, today we're going to also discuss an older movie, a film that is now 43 years old, a film which was also groundbreaking as far as its special effects and the makeup work and some of the location work, which is just spectacular. And it's groundbreaking in the sense that it blended comedy with horror in a way that really hadn't been done in a major Hollywood production up to this point. The film we're talking about, of course, is John Landis's quite extraordinary An American Werewolf in London. Now, I remember seeing the movie at an age where I shouldn't have been seeing it. Now, HBO did this thing, and I feel like the other, I almost said streamers, the other major cable movie channels of the day, the general idea was they didn't show R-rated movies in the daytime. And the way HBO, and I'm pretty sure Cinemax, the sister company, HBO Max, it's not an accident. They've been partnered since pretty much the beginning of cable, really. We're talking about 50 years almost. But they would only show R-rated movies starting at 8 p.m. And I believe the latest that they could screen it was 5 a.m. in the morning, like if it ran till 7. But even that, I'm not sure. It may have been 4 a.m. So you had a limited window with R-rated movies where they couldn't just show it all the time. And this is why we kind of joke around as Gen Xers. There were certain films that HBO and Cinemax, and if you subscribe to the movie channel and Showtime on the opposite side, they just ran certain movies over and over and over and over and over. Cocoon. There's a movie that I watched 100 times because it was always on. It's a PG-rated movie. Robert Redford, The Natural, over and over and over. Chariots of Fire, my all-time favorite movie. It was always on because it could be aired 24/7 as opposed to like an 8-hour window in a 24-hour day. But I watched An American Werewolf in London. I don't know how I managed to do it. My dad was not around, and maybe my mom was upstairs sleeping, but I turned it on. And I had seen previews on HBO. And when I say previews, I don't mean trailers. HBO used to have making of featurettes. I mean, they still do, but it's different. But they showed some of the crazy special effects and the makeup work by Rick Baker, where he won the first of his many Oscars. And for those who don't know Rick Baker, he's the best to ever do what he's done. But he's on Instagram and he's very active. Even though he's retired from the movie business, he's still very active as far as creations, and he probably works as a consultant. I mean, who knows? He seems a lot younger than he actually is. He's well into his 70s, but he still has that kind of boyish way about him. And his Instagram page is filled with unbelievable creature and makeup effects that have not been used in movies. The guy is just a home run hitter. So this HBO making of featurette on the movie, there's spoilers because we know there's a transformation sequence. So Werewolf movie. So the featurette, without spoiling it, pretty much spoils 75% of the film. Now, I was scared just watching the featurette. I'm like 8 years old. The film premiered on HBO sometime, I want to say in the summer or fall of 1982, because I believe it was released in August of 81. And it was a significant box office hit and got pretty good reviews, more good than bad. And I want to say, if you go to Rotten Tomatoes right now, it's going to be in the 80s. It's a movie that the critical estimation, if anything, has improved and gone up over the years as opposed to gone in reverse. But I watched the movie, and it was the scariest film I had seen up to that point. And I appreciated the breaks for humor. But I was an impressionable, easily frightened 8-year-old boy. And I really shouldn't have watched that movie because I didn't have nightmares. I didn't really have conventional nightmares, and I certainly never had a nightmare based on a movie I saw or something along those lines. But the film did mess me up. But having said that, I wouldn't throw it back, because the visceral reaction that the small child that I was had, it showed, as Chariots of Fire did from a completely different angle a year or so prior. It showed how much movies could get to me. And even though I knew it wasn't real, I knew that I was not watching a man transform into a beast. I knew that I was watching movie magic. But the film still got to me. It still terrified me. Still scared the you-know-what out of me. But I watched it again. And I probably watched it 3 times within the first month plus that it aired. Yeah, my dad worked late. And this is not a criticism of my mother. She wasn't that interested in what I happened to be watching. If I did my homework, if I was quiet, and the TV wasn't on at 1,000,000 decibels, she pretty much, I don't think she would have been okay with me seeing it, but she was not hovering. She was not helicoptering, or in the words of Arnold Schwarzenegger when he's in the TV show Fubar, one of the great moments that he kind of poking fun at himself, another horror film, Predator, where he mistakenly calls helicopter parents chopper parents. Get to the chopper! But my mother was not that kind of a parent. So she's upstairs watching her That's Incredible or The Fall Guy or Matt Houston or whatever TV show Scarecrow and Mrs. King may have been on at the time. I'm downstairs watching a R-rated horror movie. Now, I actually only remember the horror scenes from when I was a kid and getting scared. That terrifying moment where the family is attacked by Nazis during David's, they're not even Nazis, they're like Nazi wolves, I guess. But during David's nightmare, when he's, starting to kind of come to in the hospital after the attack early in the film, that was I still get the chills thinking of that scene, even if I haven't watched the movie in a while. That will always get me like that. But I remember nothing of the sex scenes. Now, I don't really know why I don't remember that. You would think we got to see a hot girl naked. Jenny Agutter, both David Naughton and Griffin Dunn, the 2 stars of the movies, they were in love with her. Like, they didn't just think she was hot. Griffin Dunn said, I was in love with her. I didn't have a shot. And my buddy there, David, gets to do, 2 weeks of love scenes with her. F him. And they did a commentary track. They were kind of joking around with each other. I don't think he was really angry. But it didn't make any impression on me. For all I know, that might be the first time I saw a naked woman was Jenny Agutter in American Werewolf in London. But it didn't make an impression on me. I don't know why. It should have, but it didn't. Maybe I just decided to block that out. I don't know. But I remember the scary stuff. I remember the scene with the Muppets. And I used to watch the show every week. And there was one time I watched the movie. Now that I'm thinking about it, we were at friends of my parents. And there were 2 older boys that, they happened to be, we were hanging out, we were playing video games, and then they turned the TV on and this movie was on. And I said to them, I've seen almost every episode of the Muppets and I don't recognize this episode. And he said, I think, and he had read it, I guess, I think this was an episode that only aired in England. What? That really took me by surprise. I just assumed if it was a TV show, it was the same everywhere. the first time you're exposed to something that you never thought about, right? But American Werewolf in London is an almost seamless blend of horror and comedy and what we would call pathos, and also a little bit of survivor guilt. And it's not, you don't get beaten over the head by the fact that David Kessler and Jack Goodman are Jewish, but they are. It's not an accident that his nightmare doesn't just have him being attacked by some kind of human/wolf hybrid. He's attacked by a human/wolf hybrid wearing a Nazi imprimatur. That is not an accident. That is part of the fabric of the story. And, circa early 80s, and we don't know anything about his family, but we can say there's at least a chance they lost someone in Europe. We don't know, but something. And it informs the way the movie hits us. Again, as a kid, it meant nothing. But when you get older, you start having real life experiences, good and bad. You start to see things differently. And elements of the film which did not land, that being one of them, I was simply scared out of my mind. It didn't sink in the symbolism and what are they really saying here? Why is he having this particular nightmare? Well, now, and not just because I went to film school, things land differently. Things hit differently, depending on not just your age, but your life experiences. This is the same for everybody. There are moments in this film that used to make an impression that now don't. But I'll tell you one that still does, which I think is great, and another thing that makes me laugh every time I see it. After David and Nurse Alex, she takes him in, and I could make jokes, but I won't. Her heart's in the right place for sure. I don't know where his heart's, what place it's in. He's just, wow, she's so hot, that kind of thing. But it's not told. We don't know where Jack Goodman, that's Griffin's character, and David Kessler, David Naughton, who I think is fucking amazing in the movie, we don't know where they go to school. There's a lot of stuff that's just implied. Are they grad students? Are they just college graduates backpacking across England? Now, they may get into it, but I feel like they don't exactly spell it out to a T. But there is a moment in the movie. It is a moment of seriousness. But Nurse Alex is wearing, it's like the captured flag situation where they've already done it, presumably a lot of times. And she's wearing his shirt. She's wearing his New York University t-shirt. Now, that is something that watching the film at age 9 means not. I didn't even realize. And I remember watching the movie about 5 years ago. And when I saw her in that t-shirt, I was just like screaming. I couldn't believe it. How could I have missed this? Well, you hadn't gone to NYU the last time you saw this film. Why would it have made an impression? She could have been wearing a shirt. Maybe he went to Columbia. Maybe he went to Brown. Maybe she's wearing her own shirt from fucking Vassar or Oxford. But that's something that hits, and I will always remember she's wearing a New York University shirt. Go Violets, whatever. But the movie proper, it takes the form of your classic werewolf movie. And each of the kind of movie monsters, the old school Universal movie monsters, Lon Chaney, the Wolfman, and Bela Lugosi, of course, the original Count Dracula, and the great Boris Karloff as Frankenstein. When you think in those terms, the typical werewolf movie, and if you want to go all the way back to the 30s, a very, very solid movie, one of the first with Henry Hull called The Werewolf of London. That's a film that takes on, it's a Jekyll and Hyde kind of story where Henry Hull's character, he's doing experiments and the experiments get fucked up and he becomes a werewolf. This American Werewolf in London follows the more classical narrative that even Jack Nicholson in Wolf in 1994, that movie is not great, but it has some great beats and Jack is awesome. It's one of Jack's broadest, most entertaining performances because he plays a kind of meek guy who then becomes Jack Nicholson. And it really works. And he actually has pretty good chemistry with both Kate Nelligan, who plays his wife in the movie, and Michelle Pfeiffer. But American Werewolf in London follows that model, or I should say Wolf follows along with the classic way of doing it, which is not that this isn't a kid who's doing weird experiments with moon rocks and moon flowers and all of this nonsense. He's simply somebody who gets attacked by a werewolf. It's really just that simple. He gets attacked by a werewolf, and he starts to take on characteristics of a wolf, a little bit, like a little bit more, he's a little bit more forward. His senses are heightened, and he starts to not really be hungry for human food. And it's a really kind of humorous scene in the film where he is, unfortunately, as the full moon is getting ready to make an appearance, he is at Alex's flat. He doesn't have anywhere else to go. It's not like he has a ton of money. His friend is dead. He can't really go back to the United States because he's just gotten out of the hospital. She's at the hospital at work, and he's at her flat. You watch a little TV. He reads, but he is restless, and he needs some kind of sustenance, but he's not hungry. And he keeps opening the fridge and the cupboards, and there's plenty of food there, but he's not hungry. And it becomes a thing. It almost is unsettling the first time watching the movie, because you start to say, why isn't he hungry? The guy hasn't eaten. Like, this is not good. But then he has this moment where, because he knows that, or he thinks there's a chance. He's been visited. I mean, this is a spoiler. Griffin Dunn's character kind of visits him, if you might want to say from beyond the grave. And he tells him, bro, you're going to become a werewolf. You really ought to do something about it. Well, what do you want me to do? Yeah, you got to kill yourself. Hey, fuck you. I'm not going to, what are you talking about? And actually, speaking of the makeup work, Rick Baker's work on Griffin Dunn, it's almost impossible to conceive. You can't believe how real it looks. If you want to use the word gross, some people would, but it's just spectacular. I don't even know what words to use. You run out of words for how good Rick Baker's work is in this film. So he feels like there's a chance. So you're saying there's a chance. There's a chance something terrible will happen, but he's not entirely a believer. And he has a moment as he's trying to figure out what to do with himself in Alex's apartment, where he looks at his teeth, and he goes, rah, snarl, grr. Well, the reality of being a werewolf is a lot different than just making jokes and wondering what it looks like if you make phony snarling and growling noises. Well, needless to say, this is a horror film. For all of the comedic bits, and there are comedic bits after terrible horror movie stuff has taken place, and that's where the kind of tone shift, which I thought the movie Scream 15 years later in 1996, when that came out, I thought the movie Scream balanced the terror and the brutality and the gore, because it's a pretty gory film, Scream, but with the humor. And that movie was beautifully cast, as American Werewolf in London, I think, is perfectly cast. And it's like, it's the kind of thing where the audience is on edge, because you say to yourself, is it okay that we're laughing? Yeah, it's funny. And this movie is essentially saying, and there are some people that consider this a comedy. I consider this a horror film with comedic asides, or a horror comedy, but I don't see this as either or. It's okay to cross genres. Now, a movie like The Monster Squad is more towards comedy. The Lost Boys is another film that kind of blends both, because The Lost Boys has stretches that are absolutely hilarious. And then there are moments where jump scares and incredible building suspense and feelings of dread. But American Werewolf in London, the performances are great. And for a film which has the light moments and has moments of gore, there are very serious scenes where the characters are acting like real people. And David Naughton, to me, the finest moment of his career, and he's had a pretty solid career. Some people would say, well, he could have done more, but he made a number of interesting movies. He did a film in the mid-'80s called Separate Vacations, which was, as someone who's been married, it was a very realistic portrait of marriage, and it didn't really do very well. And there are a lot of critics that thought it was terrible, but I thought he gave a pretty good performance in that film, and he was very believable there. So he's somebody who hasn't necessarily, whether as a younger actor or older actor, he was on the show, My Sister Sam? I'm pretty sure he was, so he became, a sitcom star. But he has a moment in American Werewolf in London where he has resigned himself to whatever his fate is going to be. And he calls home. And the only time we've seen any sort of domestic setting of his life is that horrendous flashback where we see what we would assume is his mom and his sister Rachel and the father and everything. And that's really, really rough. But he calls home and we only hear his side of the conversation. And we realize he's calling his sister and his parents. He's calling to say goodbye. He's not coming home. He knows he's not coming home. There's nowhere for him to go because by that point, he realizes what's happened, what he is, who he is, and how this is going to end up. And the way that he talks to, and again, it's David Naughton talking to an empty phone, but the way that he interacts with his baby sister, I guess she's probably supposed to be 11 or 12 or something like that he maintains cheer. He's not going to be able to say goodbye to his folks because they're not home, but it's just her. And the way that he talks to her, it's really beautiful. And he allows us to imagine that this is real. We forget that we're watching a movie, and no, he's not really talking to somebody. He is simply an actor in a phone booth on a soundstage, reading lines into a phone. But he makes us care. And it's beautiful film acting. It's certainly the best work that he does in this movie because a lot of what he does here is acting and reacting to special effects at some points. And he even becomes a special effect. Some of the makeup work was on him too. But it's a really, really solid performance. And Jenny Agutter, who was in a famous Nicholas Roeg film called Walkabout in the early 70s, she is terrific as Nurse Alex. Again, she comes across like a real person. She's 26. She's been in a couple of relationships. She's had a few flings, but she has a grounded quality to her. Also, her accent is amazing. It's such a beautiful accent. Her speech, everything, excuse me, everything about her character works. And the older doctor, I forgot the name of the actor, but the doctor, he's great. The way that he comes across, like he's trying to figure out what's going on, and he actually starts to think there might be some supernatural shit going on here. There's things that I can't really explain. So right now, American Werewolf in London is free with Amazon Prime, and it's free with Tubi and Freevee, and I think it's on AMC Plus. So it's all over streaming. If you get any of the channels that I mentioned, and Tubi is a free app, unlike Prime, you'll have to deal with a few commercials here and there. But whereas Prime, they hit you at the beginning now. They didn't used to do that. But if you are a horror fan, this movie is on the short list of films you must see. And not just because it's scary, but because it was pioneering with the special effects, with the makeup work, the makeup effects, some of the hydraulics they used for the kind of pivotal transformation sequence, just incredible. But it is an extraordinary film. Sorry, still have the remnants of a cold. It's an extraordinary film. And it is a movie that changed people's perception of what a horror movie could be and could do by telling audiences it's okay to laugh. Yes, this is a scary movie. Yes, this deals with very serious supernatural themes and very messed up stuff and horrifying concepts and dreams within dreams and all of this really out there stuff. But it is a great film. And it is a movie that is timeless because the effects work is so solid. What Rick Baker and what the team did here is not something that will become dated because they were practical effects, in some cases mechanical effects and makeup effects done during production, not done in post and not done in a computer. So you don't have anything where you say, oh, the seams are showing. The seams don't show. spoiler alert, it looks like a man is turning into a beast in real time. And there are images in this film, there are jump scares, and there are just moments of creeping dread that you'll never forget. And this is my favorite, and I believe this is still the best werewolf film that Hollywood has ever turned out. And as I say, I like Mike Nichols' film with Jack Nicholson. I think Wolf it's not great, but it's pretty good. And Jack is amazing. And also the late, great Christopher Plummer, phenomenal. But American Werewolf in London, they did a sequel in 97 with Tom Everett Scott, an actor I like. He's in That Thing You Do. Doesn't work. And Julie Delpy, who is freaking great. She was in the Before trilogy, Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, Before Midnight with Ethan Hawke, another guy I love. American Werewolf in Paris didn't work. And there have been a lot of werewolf movies that have been made. It's very difficult to do it right. And the Benicio del Toro one, not that good. It's probably the most difficult monster movie to get right because of the mechanics of it and because of the fact that it's very difficult to kind of imagine a happy ending. How do you do it? Is it even possible? What's the process? But An American Werewolf in London is an all-timer. And as many of these, as all of the first four of the Halloween horror series, it's kind of cool, it's getting dark, right? They all get my highest recommendation. And this is probably the most purely entertaining film that I've discussed so far of the horror movies that I'd mentioned, because this film has just huge chunks of it that are just a rip. It's just a rip. It's, what Roger Ebert used to call a bruised forearm movie, where you go like, oh, you have that kind of a reaction. An American Werewolf in London, the fifth entry in our month-long series of Halloween horror, directed by John Landis and starring David Naughton, Griffin Dunn, and Jenny Agutter. This has been episode 327 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Sunday evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, I didn't mean to call you Meatloaf, Jack. Peace.